Charlie, someone was talking through my mouth.
You were stoned. Case closed. End of story. How hot is this, babe?
You know what? Maybe it was this Lottie woman talking, because it could have been her talking through me. Because the weird thing is, this Maxine likes to call me Lottie.
Ouch. That is hot.
Being John Malkovich is directed by Spike Jonze and written by Charlie Kaufman, and it stars John Cusack, Cameron Diaz, John Malkovich, and Catherine Keener. So Being John Malkovich isn't a patron poll winner, but it is a $50 patron request. So for those who don't know, if you decide to pledge $50 on my Patreon, you'll get to choose any movie you want, and I will review or analyze it, whichever one you choose. And that's essentially it. And this patron request is from Jesus Perez, who most of y'all know as Perry. He's a $50 patron, and he wanted me to watch Being John Malkovich. So here I am talking about Being John Malkovich. So for starters, I have seen a lot of Charlie Kaufman's work. Charlie Kaufman is more notably known as a writer. I believe he's only directed 3 or 4 films. And I've seen pretty much all the essential Kaufman films at this point now. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is one of the more popular ones. I believe that's the first Kaufman movie I've ever seen, and I watched that almost feels like 8 or 10 years ago now. And I loved it instantly. That film, I had never seen a film before that was quite like that one, at least at the time. And when I watched it, I was just absolutely stunned by how creative and just how mind-blowingly trippy it was. But yeah, I've seen Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I've seen Adaptation, which I think Adaptation is my favorite Kaufman screenplay at this point. I just personally resonated with that film, both emotionally and mentally. And that film is it's still one of my favorite films of all time. I absolutely love that film. Anomalisa is another one. It's a stop-motion animation film that came out about 3 or 4 years ago. And that's an excellent film too. I'm not sure how many people have actually got to see it, but I thought that was an excellent film. I've also seen Synecdoche, New York. I actually have a review out for that, so if you haven't seen that review, please check it out. And yeah, the thing is with Charlie Kaufman, and the reason why I personally just love all of his scripts and all of the films that he's a part of, and I think this probably goes with pretty much everybody else who also really likes Kaufman, his films are just incredibly cerebral. And they're really thought-provoking and really existential and just really philosophical, even though some of them can come off kind of depressing, especially Synecdoche, New York. But overall, they're just really philosophical, really existential, really thought-provoking type of films. And pretty much with every Kaufman film, you're always going to get these type of existential type stories and themes. And honestly, every single one of his films that I've seen have not let me down. I think they've all held up really well. And they're all just incredibly well executed. In terms of the writing and the directing, Spike Jonze has directed some of these films as well, and he's also an excellent director. He's also directed Her, among many other great films. But a lot of these films are definitely stunning and brilliant because of the writing as well. And usually I'm not one to sit here and praise writing so much. I'm usually a guy who talks all about the directing, but with Kaufman films, it's incredibly difficult to not praise the writing because the writing is arguably can be more impressive than the actual film direction. But yeah, so enough about talking about Charlie Kaufman. Let's talk about the film Being John Malkovich. So obviously with all of the Charlie Kaufman films that I've seen up until this point, I had pretty high expectations going into this film and a lot of hype going into it because, again, I've pretty much loved everything Kaufman has written up until this point. And now that I've seen it, guys, Being John Malkovich is another great addition to the Charlie Kaufman screenplays that I've witnessed on screen. This film is truly incredible in a lot of different ways. And like I said, it continues to do that type of cerebral, really analytical, meta, self-aware type thing. That's another thing I didn't mention. A lot of his films also can have this kind of fourth wall breaking, self-aware meta approach, especially with films like Adaptation. And this film also has that similar approach. I mean, that seems kind of obvious with the title being John Malkovich. But again, it just really achieves that self-aware meta approach in a way that I found to be really immersive. And it's just executed in a way that's incredibly surreal, but also incredibly clever. But I also have to stop and give credit to Spike Jonze, because even though I think the writing is a huge standout in this film, I think that if this film was given into the hands of a director that just really didn't know what to do with it, it really wouldn't have been that great of a film, because a lot of what makes it great is also how Spike Jonze was able to execute a lot of these scenes, and the way that he's able to establish characters as well, and the way that he captures just the really like psychedelic and just existential dread that this film conveys. You have to give a lot of credit to Spike Jonze as well. But here's the real awesome thing about this film. It's, like I said, it's incredibly cerebral and thought-provoking, but at the same time, it's really fun, and this is probably the funniest Kaufman screenplay that I have ever witnessed. I was laughing throughout this film, and pretty much every attempt at comedy, I just found absolutely hilarious. Seriously, this film was a laugh riot for me, and what was so great about it is, again, like, it can be a really serious movie because it evolves around like really, out of body existential philosophical concepts about identity and who you are, and are you really who you are? Why is it that we find it so satisfying to want to be somebody else? And it dives into all of those serious subjects about identity, but at the same time, it doesn't really seem to take itself too seriously, and it's just an incredibly hilarious film, and it does a great job at tackling, serious philosophical concepts while also just being a funny, just enjoyable, entertaining film. And that's where this film really hits the most, is really its ability to be that kind of film. But besides the writing and directing, I thought the acting was phenomenal in this film as well. I'm not like the hugest fan of John Cusack. I don't hate him or anything or dislike him, but I've never really seen anything that he's done that really blew me away. But he really was able to encapsulate this kind of character that Kaufman wrote, and I thought it was a great job at kind of playing this kind of pathetic, starving artist kind of character. And along with everybody else, like even Cameron Diaz was really good in this film. She also kind of plays this character who at first, you kind of admire her the most because she doesn't seem to be the most flawed. But then she starts experiencing things, start doing things, and then you start seeing that almost every character in this film is incredibly flawed. But I think that's what's so great about this film as well, is like I mentioned, the themes that this film tackles. I think it tries to also expose a lot of the flaws about human beings as well, and how we can't seem to be able to maintain the difference and distinguish the difference between obsession and love, and really try to get a grip on our primal desires. This film definitely dives into that. I mean, there's even a chimpanzee that Cameron Diaz owns, and the chimpanzee character was also fleshed out in a way as well. And that was interesting. There's a moment where the chimp kind of experiences trauma, and the film has a flashback about the trauma. And it actually incorporates that aspect of the chimp's character into the story itself in a clever way that was kind of touching. I was really surprised. I was wow, didn't see that coming, but I really enjoyed that. And John Malkovich was obviously fantastic in this film as well, especially some of the stuff that he has to portray. And there's a certain dancing scene in this film, which I don't know if he's responsible for doing all of it, because some of that seemed, pretty ambitious. But either way, his portrayal of a lot of different things in this film were really convincing. And again, there's certain things in this film that he had to convey in terms of emotion and circumstance that is quite difficult, and I think he pulled it off really well. I've been really dying to see interviews where John Malkovich is talking about being John Malkovich, because that, just by its very nature, is a really interesting meta experiment. But on top of that, like, I just want to know what he thinks about having a film that's pretty much about people going inside his mind and having like really cathartic and like these really uplifting existential experiences. I'm pretty sure he's honored to have a film like this, but I just really want to hear what he has to say about it, because it's a really interesting concept that you really haven't seen anywhere else. I forgot to mention Catherine Keener's role in this film as well, and it's definitely worth noting because the kind of character she has to portray is this kind of incredibly arrogant, somewhat seductive type character. And like, you know, at first I was really hating her character. I was like, oh, her character's so goddamn annoying. And I still kind of feel that way by the end of the film. But it's interesting how this film incorporates a character into the film and where it ends as well, because she plays a pretty key role with the ending of this film. I haven't seen that many films with Catherine Keener, though I know she's in a lot of films, but whenever I see her in a film, for some reason the very first film that I think of is The 40-Year-Old Virgin, where she plays like the hot grandma. I mean, she's great in that film, but for some reason that's just the film that always comes to mind when I see her name and see her in film. The only thing I'll say about this film is that you do kind of have to suspend your disbelief, and it's not because of like the concept about like going inside of somebody's mind and kind of like peeping in on somebody's everyday experience, but it's the aspect that kind of has to do with certain characters using that kind of discovery and, you know, capitalizing on it as a business. And it just seems like something that is incredibly shady, and I'm not sure a lot of people would even do, because like, I'm sorry, like if someone ever told me that for $200 I could go into this dark, small room and lock myself in there and I'll end up being in somebody's mind for 15 minutes, I don't know, I would probably run away and call the police, because it just seems like an incredibly shady thing to say, and it just seems so unbelievable that I would find it really hard for somebody to be able to sell that. So you kind of have to suspend your disbelief that way. I mean, I'm sure you can get a few desperate people to do it, but it just seems like a really hard thing to convince somebody to do. Either way, I don't really have much issue with this film at all. I think most of it exceeds in a lot of different ways, and this is certainly an experience. Once you've seen this film, it is one of those films where you really haven't seen something quite like it. And overall, like, again, I love the themes that this film explored. The obvious, really existential themes that have to do with identity. You know, are you really who you are? The rather strange likability that trying to be in somebody else's body has, and also again the kind of flawed nature of human beings who they can't really distinguish the difference between love and obsession. Again, this film just tackles a lot of thought-provoking philosophical themes that a lot of Kaufman films do, but they're again really well executed and really well expressed throughout the film, and I really enjoyed all of that. And again, Spike Jonze, excellent director. I don't know how many films Spike Jonze has directed. I think I've only seen Adaptation, Being John Malkovich, and Her, so I definitely need to watch more films that are directed by Spike Jonze. I'm sorry if this review was a little bit on the spoiler-ish side. I mean, I don't really spoil that much, but usually I try not to talk too much about the plot, and I think I maybe talked about the plot a little bit too much in this, but either way, I don't think it's really going to ruin the movie for you, because this film has a lot to offer. So I'm going to give Being John Malkovich a 9 out of 10. Yeah, I really had a lot of fun with this movie. Again, I laughed constantly throughout this film. It's quite a hilarious film. You could even argue that this is a comedy for the most part. So if you really enjoyed what I had to say about Being John Malkovich, please give this video a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.